Today I'm talking about inheritances and how they affect your retirement planning. So the question, I get asked a lot is how much capital do you need for a good retirement, and should we allow for inheritances in that? And if we do, how? And it's a really complicated question because it can feel a bit morbid. It can feel a bit like we're planning on our parents' demise. What I've found is that you can't help but think about it subconsciously. So I've found it's much better to just bring it into your planning. And I'm going to talk about how in today's episode. So let's have a look. Firstly, just the standard disclaimer. Everything we do here is general advice. You should do your own research or seek advice before you act on anything we talk about here. So where does this fit in the context of your retirement planning and our 5 essential steps? This is about your retirement goals. Quite clearly, if you know you're going to receive an inheritance, that may mean you need less capital for retirement than someone else who's not going to receive any inheritance, but who has the same desires. So this is all about goals. It's about determining how much capital you're going to need, knowing that inheritance is likely or probable. And we're going to talk about how you bring all this in. But it's at the planning stage, and it's really important this is at the planning stage around the goals because subconsciously, like I said, you can't help but know it's coming, and you're better off to actually do the maths. And I'm going to show you how to do it so it's not morbid, how it's not waiting, or it doesn't feel like you're waiting for your parents to pass to get the money, so to speak. So let's answer the question. But as always, the best questions, the answer is it depends. So should you allow for inheritance? It depends. And the key factors, and I'm going to make these factors come alive with a few stories to follow this. And these stories are based on real people that we've given advice to in our bricks and mortar financial planning business. So the first thing is on how much. If it's a relatively modest inheritance, you're not going to potentially rely on that as if it's a big one. Let me give you an example. There's many areas in Australia where property has just had crazy gains. So I'll give you an example. If you live in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and if you have elderly parents in the eastern suburbs of Sydney that are in a house, and they might have bought that house 40, 50, 60 years ago, but that house could be worth anywhere from 2 to 20 to 30 million. Now, if you know that's going to pass you eventually, it's very hard not to think about that, and very hard not to impact. Now, no judgment in today's session. We're going to talk about what it means to you and how you adjust your planning for that. So number one, how much? Number two is how certain. How likely is it? And we see everything from maybe I'm getting an inheritance from an uncle or auntie who doesn't have any kids, to situations where you're the executor. For this audience of this podcast, most of our audience are in that 50s, early 60s, planning on retiring in the next decade. That's our target, who we aim to help for this podcast. So you do the maths. And let's say you're 55, your parents are going to be somewhere between 75 and 90, just depending on when they had you. So they're at their latter years, and we know that life is finite. Somewhere, that life expectancies are now longer than they've ever been. And you kind of expect people to live in their 80s, but you also know how well people are going. So there's a difference between having a 75-year-old parent who's still backpacking around the world and really fit. You might say, wow, they're going to live to be 100. That's 30 years away, 25 to 30 years away. I probably shouldn't rely on that too much. If I'm 50 myself, I'm going to be 80 before I potentially inherit and that's awesome for them. It's awesome for you to have them around, but you probably shouldn't be relying on that too much. You can rely on it a little. We'll talk about that with some of the examples. But I'll contrast that to people, and in some of these case studies, you may also be the executor on your parents' wills. So you may have seen the will. You may be an only child. You may know that you're going to inherit the house. And like I said, in a lot of places in Australia, that's substantial. And if I'll give you an example. I don't have any parents alive. My mother was the last one to pass a couple of years ago. She went through the stage of retirement village, then aged care. And when you see when people go into aged care, that they're into their last stanza of life, however you want to call it. You know it's not going to be a long time. Sometimes you don't want it to be a long time just for mercy's sake. In my case, my mother did not want to be here at that stage. Yeah, so depending on where they are. So back to this topic, in the inheritance. If you've got parents who are in their late 80s, early 90s, or parent, and they're in a nursing home, inside the next decade, even to be wildly optimistic, you're going to inherit. And if you're the executor there, well, you often know that it's for certain. It's going to happen. You'll know the assets. You'll know the house values and everything else. The only wild card in that case is usually what aged care costs are going to be. But in Australia, they're not onerous in most cases. So that brings in also, I talked about there about how far away it is. Is it likely to be in the next year or two? Is it likely to be 30 years away? Or is it possible? That's going to have a massive impact on whether you allow for it. And then there's your own work-life retirement plan goals. I've seen some people that I know they're going to work till they don't want to work, no matter how wealthy their parents are. And I've seen others that I know will stop work as soon as they can because they want to do certain things. Now, once again, no judgment. There's no right answer. This is your plan. You get to decide. You get to live your life the way you want to. And these stories I'm going to tell in a minute give some examples of that. So that also applies then to your own legacy plans. Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Are there charities or causes you want to make a difference to? So let's bring this to life with my first story. And all of these are based, I've changed things slightly, but they're based on real examples. So the first story is a couple, they were recently married. One had been married before, other one hadn't. No kids, aged 48. They're living in their own home. They're happy with that home. So they've got no plans on building a bigger house, etc. They've got 800,000 in combined super, but keep in mind, they're 48. Can't touch super till they're 60, so it's 12 years away. They've just sold an investment property that they've been working on. They've got 800,000 coming when that settles. So that's when they came to see us looking for advice. And they have been career focused. They've worked really hard, but they're kind of over that. They want to actually spend time traveling while they're youngish. They want to focus on experiences. They know they're going to inherit. So in this case, they know they're going to inherit $5 million. One of them, this is highly certain. The other one's got a more modest amount, but one is an only child. Parents are in their 80s, and they're still in their own home. So it gets interesting then about how do we plan for this? And once again, we're trying not to be morbid. We're trying not to be entitled. We're trying not to be expecting this, but where it's inevitable, we can plan for it. I'm going to talk about this. So they actually want to keep working, but in less stressful jobs. So they've been earning good six-figure incomes, but they're over the career grind. They're having to work. There are not enough holidays. So for them, they know this inheritance is coming. They think they've got capability, but they don't quite know how to do it. They've got 800,000. They worry about what should they do with that investment wise, because they don't have any money from the parents right now, and the super's not available. They've got their house and no debt. So it's really about how we're going to use that 800,000. So we spend a lot of time thinking about goals. And I should point out our How Much calculator and workshop, which you can access on our website, will help you with a lot of this stuff. You can plug in the numbers and it will do the retirement maths. But I'm going to talk broadly about it here. So picture some stages here. Stage one for them is between 48 and 60, so super not available. So stage two, the super kicks in, and if it's 12 years away. If they invest their super well, it's going to at least double in that time as well. And keep in mind the rule of 72. Divide a number into 72 and you get how long it'll take to double. So on a 7.2% return, for instance, it'll double every 10 years. So should double in that period. So they've got the 800,000 now. They may want to draw from that, because in the perfect world they're gonna earn their 50 grand each, but they'd like to spend about 250,000 a year each. And on the 50 grand each, a little bit of taxes, maybe they got 40, 45 each, call it 80 to 90. So they need another 160,000 a year to cover off on their travels. Now, we play around. Now, if you do the maths, if you just took, let's say we said an extra 150, if we divided that into 800,000, so not allowing for any return, we get just over 5. So they're in this borderline state where it's not really enough. So we know that if they went hard spending to what they would like to, the 250,000, they'd run out of money in 6 years. Now, there's a chance that the parents, and I've got on the screen here for those of you who are watching, parents in their late 70s, they were actually one late 70s, one in the 80s, one unwell, one, moderately okay. But it would feel a little bit too much to think, to be relying on that in the next 5 years. So they actually made a decision they were going to earn a little bit more. It was very easy to bump up their earnings to say $75,000, $80,000. So all of a sudden they made a decision that they would earn $150,000 between them, still not working hard in their careers that they were in, but they could easily earn $150,000, then spend $100,000 on top of that. That, in simple maths, divide the $100,000 into $800,000, you get 8 years, but add some decent return. We modelled using calculators like our How Much calculator what it would look like, and we got that, it should last the 12 years with a half-decent return. Now, 12 years is bang on when they get to age 60, so we wanted a contingency plan, simple contingency plan. They don't have any debt, they've got a property, so they could tap into a reverse mortgage. So we talked about stage 1 there until they're 60 and they can access their super, because as soon as they're 60, the super kicks in. There's another 1.6 million, which will keep them going. Even if they're not working at that stage, that'll keep them going, for at least 10 to 20 years, depending on the returns that they're getting and how much it grows in the next 10 years. Never pretend that all this is certain. Be conservative in your return investments. In our How Long calculator and How Long workshop, we show you how to be conservative there, but realistic. But so we know the gap here is potentially the last few years of before they turn 60. Our contingency plan, if the parents are still going strong, and they want that, they don't want to be feel entitled and be waiting for their parents' demise, but they just want to know they've got a plan. They've also worked hard. They know the parents have worked hard. They don't have any kids here, so they don't want to or need to leave a legacy. They have no big plans at this stage about making any nephews, nieces, charities wealthy. Once again, no judgment, just your own decisions around planning. So in this case, we've got a contingency if their money runs out a bit before age 60, which is potentially borrow, whether that's reverse mortgage or otherwise, or a standard loan, but there'll be a way to do that. Then the super kicks in, then they've got another 10 to 20 years. By then, mum and dad are 100 if they're around. And given their current health, it's not likely. So at that stage, they inherit $5 million. So we know that $5 million is going to generate, if invested well, it'll generate $200,000 to $280,000 a year, which will cover their good life. Now, that would be maintaining the capital if they invest it well. Now, I've noted there that it's coming from property, which means it'll keep up its value with inflation. It might even grow a bit more. So that was one story. So they happily now have adjusted their life they've pulled work back, so they've still got a plan to earn $150,000. They will start planning the travels. They're already booking in the travels, the experiences they want to. So they're going to do that while they're young, fit, healthy, and knowing that it's not going to put crazy pressure on them or make them feel like they're waiting on the inheritance. So that's story 1. Story 2, another hard-working professional couple earning good money. In this case, $500,000 per annum. I would point out this is in Sydney, so earning $500,000 in Sydney is not huge, particularly as you'll see. They've got 3 teenage kids, 13, 15, 17, at private schools. So bang, there goes minimum $100,000 after tax. So keep in mind, 500,000 might be 300,000 after tax, 100,000 off. For private schools, down to 200,000. They're just at the end of their mortgage at this stage. They're 55. They actually want to work to age 65. They don't want to stop work. But they know, this is a Sydney example, good suburb in the eastern suburbs in Sydney. They've got an almost certain probability He's actually executor of the parents' estate. They live in a $10 million house, plus they've got super, etc. He's only got one sibling. So they know, there's a high probability of inheritance of 6 to 10 mil. Now, they're already on track for good retirement, but that's because they've been paying off the mortgage. Then when they paid off the mortgage, they've been putting 10 grand a month into super. But their dilemma is they'd like to spend more time on travel, particularly ski trips with the kids. So they've discovered their family, they all love skiing. They love their trips, whether it's to Japan, whether it's to Whistler in Canada, or anywhere in the world, and they know they're going to have plenty of money, but they'd like to do it now, but they feel guilty on a couple of fronts, and not crazy guilty, but they know if they took that 10 grand a month and they spent it on travel, they might not be as on target for their retirement. Now, we put their mind to rest pretty quickly, and we said, look, your inheritance is inevitable. They're 55, and once again, do the maths. I can't remember the exact parent age here, but if you add 25 to 55, you're at 80. I feel like the parents were in their 80s. So we would say, let's be wildly optimistic and assume your parents live to be 105. So let's make sure we've got a plan that will allow you to not need any money from the parents for 20 to 25 years. Now, that means the parents are almost getting up to 110. It's highly improbable they're going to be alive. So we just based the plan around that. And we said, okay, we know, so by 65, now keep in mind, these two both enjoy their work. They don't want to retire. They actually want to retire, but they want to spend a bit more on lifestyle right now instead of bunkering down like they have done for the last 10 years, school fees, mortgages, and then putting extra money into super. They want to take the foot off the accelerator and live a bit of life, particularly while the kids are in that zone that they're enjoying travelling with them. And part of their goals is to even keep their kids travelling with them as adults, and something that's quite common and popular. It's certainly one of my goals and something that I still do. Just the right amount of work. I could retire, but I have no plans to retire. But part of the extra money that I earn while working goes to fund holidays or accommodation in really nice places, and then tell the kids to come over and visit. So we find it's a common goal. If you've got kids that are happy to holiday with you, well done. And it's a nice goal. So what do we do in their case? We just said, well, look, even though when we did the projections, they weren't quite in a perfect position to retire at age 65, they weren't that far off. Now, they have a lot of legacy goals. They'd like their kids to be able to afford houses in Sydney. So he was actually working with his parents and his sibling to have some of that inheritance actually passed directly to the kids, so the kids could access that and buy homes. And that was a separate goal, separate sort of strategy. But the main thing here is we showed them that even if, 10 years' time, even if they were going to run their money down over 20 years, now let's do some quick maths around this. If they need $250,000 a year to live, and to live a good life in retirement, and they want to preserve the capital, target's going to be about $5 million. But if we're happy to spend it down over 20 years, that target's going to be closer to $3.5 million. So, and you can do the maths on this in the how much calculator. So they were actually on target for $5 million with the 10 grand a month. But take away the 10 grand a month, and they're only on target for about $3.5 million. But we assured them that that's absolutely fine, knowing there's inheritance, because by the time they, in theory, run out of money, which they're not likely to, their parents literally would be 110. So it's highly unlikely it gets to that. It's highly unlikely they inherit enough before then. They were able to par their goals back as well, knowing their kids were going to be helped by their parents' inheritance into first homes, etc. And in their case, there was no guarantee they were even going to stop work at age 65. We've worked with a lot of medical professionals over there, specialists, etc. And one thing in common for them is they often don't want to stop work early, which is unusual, particularly compared to people that have worked physically hard their whole life, who they know they're going to have to stop with their body. That's why it's so important to look at all this stuff personally and individually. Third story, and this one's one I've watched develop literally over 20 years. So one of my clients, many of my clients are wealthy, but in this case, multiple kids, and we started looking after the kids when they were about 30. And for one of them, they've done really well on their own planning. In this case, she's just turned 50, married, 2 kids, living a good life, earning really good money. Wealthy parents, she knows she's going to inherit a lot, but she made the choice to build her own independent wealth. And you might say, well, why would you do this when you know you're going to inherit 5 mil or 10 mil or 2 mil, whatever the number is, but why would you still do that? And I thought I'd talk about this because there's a lot of good reasons. One is just for your own self-worth. I find for a lot of people, I've watched if they don't have a career or a business, they don't have as much purpose. And in this case, she knew she was going to inherit wealth from the age of 30. But she started off, bought property, just little bits of extra into super, building a share portfolio gradually. Nothing crazy, but 20 years later, she's financially independent in her own right. She's fully capable of retiring in her own right, but she chooses not to. Now, one of the conversations I have a lot with parents that have done well is just be careful that the example you're setting for your kids. We've got younger clients that are often done pretty well, and they might think, they might want to stop work and retire, but I'll say, just be careful. Your kids may observe you with money and not working, and they may not understand in their soul of how you got that money and the fact that you worked hard for it. So they just assume that money is always there. One of the art forms about making good money is trying to bring up kids that will also have a work ethic and not be spoiled brats. And it's a common conversation we have with people, particularly, and it's double whammy when you know there's inheritance that's substantial. And in today's content that I'm talking about, I've talked about really decent chunks of inheritances. You'll also get inheritances that are, 2, 3, 400,000, but sometimes a couple knowing they're going to inherit 300,000 each, 600,000 in total. That is just such a lifeline for them in their 80s or to help their kids. So all of it means you can plan for retirement. But the big bit about this third story is that in this case, she wanted to show her kids what hard work is about. And these kids are going to inherit from their grandkids too. They're going to inherit a lot of money. So wanting to see them have work ethic was really important to her. She didn't want to see them entitled. She didn't want to see them as brats, knowing they were going to get a lot of money. And she clearly enjoyed her work. And they live a nice life as well, all the holidays, etc. So 3 stories there to answer that question. Should you allow for an inheritance in retirement? And once again, I believe you should factor it in. Not to say rely on it, but you should factor in, particularly given the inevitability. And as always, I said it depends. And you've got to work out what your story is. What's your own story? What's your own plans? What's your own goals? How much are we talking about here? And how certain is it? If it's very, very certain, you're already thinking about it in your own mind. You're already thinking about it in your head. So you may as well allow for it and optimize your life without being entitled, without, all the rest of that. But ultimately, it's your life. You get to decide. What's your goals? What's your values? What's your plans? Do you value work ethic? Do you value experiences? Once again, your goals, your plans, and tools like the How Much Workshop and calculator can help you quantify the maths. And that's the last bit here, which is do your own planning, do the maths of retirement, and be conservative in your allowances. So allow an extra 10 years for your parents to live beyond what is likely or probable. Allow for less growth in their own assets. Allow for less growth in your own assets. So you can still have it there as a buffer, but don't be overly optimistic about it, because it may cause you to all of a sudden be in a position in your 70s or 80s where you haven't got enough because you're reliant on parents' money that hasn't come yet because they lived longer than you thought. I've seen that happen. It's not a nice place to be in. All of a sudden people are scrimping and saving. So build it into your plan. So just to sum up my final point, should you allow for inheritance? You already are. You're just doing it subconsciously. So you may as well make it conscious, put it into the calculators, do the maths around it, and have a plan that's not entitled, that's not waiting for it, that's not hanging out for it, but that is a plan so you can focus on living the best life you can now and in your retirement. Till we talk again, Rob McGregor signing off.